Disappointed. Oh, well, that's a lot for sports day. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be the next episode in my new makeup and movies series, where I'm going to be sharing all of my thoughts on some new makeup as well as a demo, while giving you some film reviews on the 6 films that I saw at the cinema in the last few weeks. I have the new Shiseido Synchro Skin Self Refreshing Foundation, and we're going to be doing a side-by-side with the OG formula. I've got the new Viseart Midsommer Lumiere palette, the Fara Homidi bronzer, as well as one of the new Kosas blushes, one of the new shades of the Kosas blushes, one of the new highlighters from Nars that is in this palette, and the new limited edition Gucci lipstick. So if you want to see all of these new products in action, as well as hearing my thoughts on these 6 films, then keep watching. Okay, so kicking us off, Clown in a Cornfield. I spoke about this, I think, in my last episode of Makeup and Movies, and just talked about how unexcited by this I was. I mean, if you think about the title, does that sound like a great film to you? Obviously, this was a horror, and I had seen a trailer for this that just really did not inspire me to watch it. It literally just sounded exactly as the title would suggest. It's going to be a murderous clown killing people in a cornfield, you know, a full-blown slasher. And while I love a psychological thriller and horrors, not slashers, that is kind of like a sub-genre that is just not really my thing. Like, I don't really like gory films. I like something with a bit more of a storyline. This, let me tell you, was a big surprise to me. You know, I literally forced myself to see this just because there was nothing else on, and I thought, you know, that's the whole point of my cinema membership, that I sort of think outside the box and I see films I wouldn't have if I had to, you know, pay full price every time I go and see them. So I went to see this, and it was so much better than I thought. Are there clowns and cornfields in the film? There are, but there's so much more to this film than just that, and it's actually had like a good story, some really welcome character development and backstory, and just a really great storyline. Was it like the greatest horror film that I've ever seen? Not really. Were there some gory moments? Sure. Nothing like as bad as I was expecting, and it was just so much better than I thought, given the title and the trailer. I really wish they'd done a better job with those 2 things, because I feel like so many people will skip this film, as I almost did, thinking it's just going to be, you know, a murderous clown running around a cornfield killing teenagers. And it was a lot more than that, a lot more to the story, a lot more to the motivations and just what was really going on in this small town. Quite funny in places as well. I really enjoyed this a lot more than I thought. This is a 7 out of 10 for me. Next up, we went to see a family film, How to Train Your Dragon. Now, I have seen the original film, the animated version of this film, so I did sort of know the storyline, and this is the live action version of that film. If you're not familiar with How to Train Your Dragon, as you know, I don't do spoilers in these videos, just in case you want to go and see something without knowing, you know, anything that we haven't sort of heard in the synopsis or in the trailer. But I can tell you a little bit about the plot without giving anything away that you're not supposed to know going into it. So the How to Train Your Dragon is about a fictional village built into the hills, and they have a pest problem, okay, this village, and the pests are dragons. So they spend their lives, they're a Viking community, fighting back and fighting off these dragons from sort of destroying their village, and that's kind of their livelihood, and they train their young people in being like dragon conquerors, dragon killers, and that is like the prestigious job. So the film focuses on the chief of this community and his young son, who is sort of not your like average member of this community. He's a bit useless. He's no good at helping with like the dragon problem, and his father is just like, he's just the source of his father's shame because he's so useless to their community. So that's kind of the premise of this film, and I really enjoyed this. We went to see this all together as a family. I thought the music, the visuals, the dragons, obviously the dragons aren't live action, they're, you know, animation, and they were incredible. So well done, beautiful, realistic. Not that I guess I've ever seen a real dragon to compare, but they just felt so authentic and so realistic, and they had so much personality and character. It was really emotional, really moving, beautiful. I loved Astrid's character development. So she is the sort of female boss of this film, and she's like the sort of the hero dragon slayer, like young person, up and coming uprising star of like the dragon killing community, and she forms like an unlikely bond with the chief's son, and she starts off like really unlikable and a bit mean, like the sort of mean girl, popular, everyone loves her but not very kind type of character. And just her character development throughout the film I thought was so great, so well played, where she started off as this really annoying, sort of smug, mean character with this gang of like idiots following her around everywhere, and yet became so much more likable as the film progressed, which isn't easily done when you start off so annoying, which I really thought was great. The one issue I had with this film is I hate with a vengeance the dad. The dad in this film is vile and should have his son taken away from him for his own good, because he is a mean, nasty, horrible man and terrible parent. Like, some of the things he says to his son in this film, in the beginning of this film, is awful, unforgivable. I hate that it's sort of portrayed as like, oh, you know, but it's because I thought you were useless. But then when I realised that you're actually, you know, you have some use to you, I'm gonna be nicer to you and I want to be your dad now. And that's just supposed to be okay. No. Like, he literally made me absolutely fuming, and I hate his guts, and I hate that he has this sort of redemption arc towards the end of the story, because he deserves to be left alone forever, disowned by his son. So that slightly took away from my enjoyment of the film, to be honest, because I was so angry at this man, and I didn't like that he was so sort of redeemed towards the end. But the rest of it I absolutely loved. So this was a 9 out of 10 for me. By the way, I don't have a new mascara to try today, so I'm just using my tried and true Holy Grail Charlotte Tilbury. Okay, so now it's time to try this new reformulated Shiseido foundation. So the first thing you'll notice is the packaging is a little different. The bottle is exactly the same, but the new version has a cap and a pump, whereas the old version had this sort of twist pump. So you twist it open and shut with the pump, and there's no sort of external cap. So I do think I prefer that. It's just going to look a bit cleaner, as this can get a bit messy around there. And although it doesn't leak, or it hasn't for me, it does feel a little scary to take it on holiday. So I'm going to do the old version on this side and the new one on this side, and I have the same shade Maple in both. So hopefully I won't look too bonkers because we have sports day today. So next up, we're going to talk about the most highly anticipated film of the year for me personally, 28 Years Later. Oh, I can't tell you how excited I have been for this film. You guys know because I've been talking about it incessantly all year. This is probably my favourite horror franchise, like series of films ever. It's one of the, like, the original 28 Days Later was probably the beginning of my real obsession with horror and scary films in general. Just absolutely incredible, such an original, amazing storyline. I absolutely loved everything about the first two films. So when I heard that this third one was coming, I was beside myself. And if you'll remember, I've spoken about the trailer for 28 Years Later and how this is the greatest trailer of all time. My favourite trailer I've ever seen. So exciting, so disturbing, haunting, incredible without giving anything really away. So as you might have guessed from the title of this film, this is set, you know, a good couple of decades on from 28 weeks later. And if you haven't seen either of the first two films, let me give you a little bit of a sort of summary as to where we are. So in the first film, there is a virus that has spread throughout the UK only. How unlucky are we? Just can't catch a break. So yeah, so basically what happened is that scientists were experimenting on chimps in a lab to see whether, I think, rage could be like learned or whether it was born. That's something like what they were doing with these chimps. And what they essentially were doing with these experiments was subjecting chimps or exposing chimps to violent television, videos, music, etc. in a like controlled environment 24 hours a day. So they had these chimps in this lab and they were just showing them violent images constantly to see like the effects on the brain and their behavior. And what had happened is these chimps had become infected with like a rage virus. So they were incredibly violent, aggressive, dangerous, murderous animals. And one day some environmentalists had broken into this lab to set these animals free without realizing what kind of animals they were. They got bitten by the chimps and they were infected with this rage virus. And it's kind of like, you know, they don't like to call it a zombie film because it is supposed to be an infection as opposed to them being like dead and zombies. These are sort of just human beings that can still be killed, like in a normal way that you would kill a human being, but they are full of murderous, violent rage. And they're fast, okay? They are terrifying, running, screaming, murderous machines. In the second film, the virus had supposedly become under control. So the survivors were all rounded up in like a sort of army controlled building, and the infected were believed to have fully died, or they had fully died out due to starvation, because all the survivors were being protected in this sort of community that was completely safe. And there was no food for them to eat, so they basically starved to death and the virus was gone. But spoiler alert for the second film, if you plan to watch that and don't want to know what happens, they didn't know that some people are carriers of the disease. So there were some people left, survivors, who had been bitten but not infected, but they were now carrying the disease. And if they were to, let's say, swap bodily fluids with someone who was not, you know, immune, then it would all start all over again. And that's what happens in the second film. So I do think you can watch this third film without having seen the first and second. You know, there is a bit of backstory given. It sort of stands alone as its own film without the first two necessarily being, you know, a must-see before it. But of course, it would be better if you did watch the first two just to understand where we've come from. So in this third film, as I said, we are 28 years on from the second. And what's happened now is the world has forsaken the UK. They've just given up on us. And it's now like a no-go zone. So no one is allowed on or off. The whole of the UK has been quarantined and left to die. Essentially, they said, we're not going to help you anymore. We're not coming over there. It's too dangerous. We're not risking the infection spreading to our communities or our countries. So we're just leaving you there. And if you survived, good luck with it all. If you didn't, never mind. It's just now a complete like no-go zone. And what's happened is everyone has kind of settled into this, you know, new way of life. So there are communities that have sort of gathered and found ways to survive and to keep the infected away and to just live like as a new normal in this bizarre world. But also the infected have kind of evolved as well, and they also have their communities. There are now these things called alphas, who are sort of particularly big and strong versions of the infected, and there are just all kind of different categories of infected, whereas before it was just one sort of species. Now there are sort of different varieties of infected, and everyone has just kind of developed their way of surviving and is just doing their best to live in this like crazy world. So it focuses on this island. So there's an island off of mainland Scotland, I think, where survivors have, you know, built a community on this island, and it is connected to the mainland by a causeway that is only above sea for like a few hours of the day. So that's how they've stayed safe. They have, you know, guard towers guarding the causeway, so no infected can kind of get across it. It's just a thin, narrow walkway. And every now and then, members of the community will have to cross the causeway to go and get supplies or whatever they need to survive. All of the kids here in the community are sort of taught to fight the infected, and everyone in the community has a job, and it's just kind of life as normal on the island, or as normal as possible in this, like I said, quite bonkers, frankly, new world. So that's where we're at. The main sort of focus of this film, as far as the characters, is a family of three, a mum and dad and a sort of coming of age, like 11, I think 12-year-old boy who decides it's time for him to take his first trip to the mainland. So that is the sort of beginning of this film, as it's going to be this boy's first time going to the mainland, potentially encountering the infected. So I'm going to be using this Fara Homidi bronzer. Let me tell you, this brush from the Sonia DG Tissue collab is the ultimate brush for this bronzer. It is absolutely perfect. Okay, so let me tell you, I love to be scared, and not many scary films really scare me these days. You know, I've seen it all. I'm pretty bulletproof when it comes to scary films. This terrified the living daylights out of me. I went to see this on my own opening day because my husband, you know, we couldn't find a time when we could go together when the children weren't at school, so I went on my own, and I fully thought I might have a panic attack. The first, I'd say, half of this film honestly scared the living daylights out of me. Like the most scared I can remember being by a film. I don't think I've been this scared watching a film maybe since 7, I'm not sure. It terrified me. My heart was in my mouth. I probably set a new heart rate record. I wish I'd been wearing my watch. I'm sure my heart rate was at least 200. It terrified me. So if you're easily scared, I mean, the thing is, everyone finds different things scary, but this petrified me, okay? You have been warned. The first half of this, given that my sort of expectation and hope for this film was so high, I'd say the first half of this film absolutely satisfied me. I loved the backstory, I loved like the build of it, the terrifying parts. I loved that we've slightly evolved the infected, so there's kind of something that feels a bit new about it. Of course, the music was incredible. It went full throttle, like pretty much from the start, terrifying, which I love. I don't want to wait to be terrified until the second half, you know. But then that's when things took a slight disappointing turn for me. Towards the like second half of this film, it really transitioned, I would say, into almost like a completely different film and almost genre at times. I feel like the second, maybe let's say the final third, maybe the first 2/3 were pretty much like what I wanted and expected from this film. And then the final third really like turned into a sort of coming of age story, as opposed to being this like terrifying full throttle horror. It really shifted into like a journey film, you know, an adventure journey, yeah, coming of age story, which was just not what I wanted from it, and felt disjointed, disconnected to the series and the first half of the film. I felt like it really lost its way, and there were just so many other directions that I felt like would have worked so much better that we could have gone in. And I don't think the storyline, I think, was great and interesting, and I loved the introduction of characters and all of the nods to the original. I really loved that. But I just felt like we lost the fear, we lost that, like the focus of the film, I felt like, and I don't know why we did that, and it really made me sad, because it ended with me feeling quite disappointed. And like I said, I had such high expectations. Perhaps they could just never have been satisfied, because it is, you know, one of my all-time favourite, if not my all-time favourite films and series. And perhaps it was just never going to be able to live up to that. But then I feel like the first half did. And then I don't know what we did with the second half. You know, I liked the weirdness of the second half. I just didn't like the sort of different direction that we took the film, as far as like the heart and the core of it, you know? So yeah, I did feel slightly disappointed. Great character development across the board. We always get that in these films. Great storyline. I feel like the emotion of the film and the acting was fantastic, but the direction that towards the end that went in, and also the very ending, felt like a full-blown fever dream. Like what happened there? I felt like it was Kill Bill for a second. So that was strange. I will say the ending was very clearly setting us up for a future film, another film. Very obvious that we were leading to, you know, what's coming next. I also felt a little disappointed. Oh, well, that's a lot for Sports Day, okay? I felt a little disappointed that there was no continuation of that sort of immunity storyline that I mentioned earlier. That was just like, don't know what happened there, but we weren't told. There's going to be the need for quite a bit of blending. That was a lot more metallic than I was expecting, but it's blending in quite nicely. Definitely a bit light for me. This is the medium palette. It is a little light, so it's kind of looking a bit ashy and grey, and definitely a bit much for Sports Day. Hopefully with a bit of buffing and some blush, that will calm down. So I really ummed and ahed about the score to give this, because I just love the franchise so much. I find it hard to sort of mark it too low, but I gave this an 8. I loved the first half. Like I said, was everything I kind of wanted it to be. The second half lost me slightly, so there's a couple marks off there, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. I just kind of wanted it to stay on track with where we started, so an 8 for me. Next up, Megan 2.0, another film I wasn't excited to see, but I sort of made myself, because I, you know, was at a loose end and there was nothing else on. So I have seen the original of this one. This, if you're not familiar with Megan, is about, so in the original, someone had made this doll as like a toy. It was like an interactive, you know, AI doll that ended up going on like a murderous rampage and being a terrifying nightmare. That's kind of the backstory of Megan. So this is the sequel, Megan 2.0. And again, having seen the trailer, I thought this is just not going to be good. It was probably slightly better than I expected it to be based off of the trailer. A little bit more of a sort of interesting storyline. I feel like the attempts at comedy didn't work. Either the delivery was off or the script, I don't know, but it just wasn't funny where it was like clearly supposed to be funny. I didn't find it funny. I feel like the plot was quite thin, and this whole film feels like it was horror for teenagers. That's what it felt like. It felt quite childish, both with the storyline and just the character and plot development. It really feels like quite a sort of childish film, which perhaps that's the intention. You know, it is about dolls after all, and I'm just not really like the target audience for this film, and that's okay. I don't always have to be. But there was not a single slightly scary moment whatsoever. Not a single bit of this film, you know, not a single hair stood up at any moment. Didn't even get a blink out of me, I don't think. Nothing scary to me about this whatsoever. I do feel it got slightly saved by a cast doing their absolute most and best with like slim pickings. So for me, this was a 6. If you're going to do a bit of comedy in a horror film, please make it funny. Give us a bit more of a storyline, something juicy, and scare me. If it's going to be a horror film, I want to feel a little scared, if not full-blown trauma like I did in 28 Years Later. Next up, the Formula One film that I had absolutely zero intention of seeing. I'm not a Formula One kind of person. I went to see this again because I was at a loose end and I thought, let's just go and see any old film, and that was the only one I hadn't seen. I have a really unpopular opinion about this. I actually had read someone's review of this film, like I think the day I was going to see it, and it was horrific. And I almost thought, oh, maybe I won't bother. Maybe I'll just stay home and have a cup of tea and it will be just as entertaining. So I think I have a different opinion on this to like the common opinion. I loved this. I don't know if it's because I'm not a Formula One person or if it's because I am an elite Olympic sport person. I don't know if that helped me connect more with this film, because there's a lot of focus here on the team behind, you know, the athletes in elite sport, a lot about that environment, the highs and lows, the pain, the sacrifice, and the work that goes into competing at this level in any sport. I loved all of that, and I think they nailed it, which is no surprise because Lewis Hamilton produced this film. So obviously they must have got, you know, I don't know if this is accurate to what Formula One circuit and life is like, but I would have thought he obviously does, so it must be, right? Now, no surprise, Hans Zimmer did the score for this film. It was phenomenal, okay? This music in this film, of course, made me feel things, okay? It was so exciting, tense, emotional. It really did add so much to the film. This music was exceptional, of course, kind of goes without saying when you see who's in charge of it, but worth a mention anyway. I felt like this truly captured the spirit of sport at this level. I really felt like invested in it, you know, having seen all of this and worked with athletes throughout the years, the highs, the lows, everything felt really real and true to my experience and what I've seen on a day-to-day basis. The couple of things I didn't like about this, the race commentary was definitely a little off and odd and slightly corny, and that felt a bit distracting. Colour is so pretty. The other thing I really, really hated about this film is, like, I don't know if this is a slight spoiler alert, slight minuscule potentially if you want to know absolutely nothing about it. I absolutely hate that they felt the need to shoehorn in the love story in this film. It was so unnecessary and pointless. It really felt like, as I said, shoehorned into the plot for no reason. And I hate that we had this woman in this incredible position that she'd fought and clawed her way into, which is not easy in such, I mean, sport in general is very, like, as in working in professional and high level Olympic sport, elite sport, it's a very male dominated environment. It's not easy as a woman to get to the top in any sport, in any field, as a coach, as a sports scientist, etc. So the fact that this woman had, you know, made her way, grafted and won this incredible, you know, job, got herself into this position because of her talent and her experience and her expertise, then got completely ripped to pieces by the fact that she had to sleep with the driver. I just hated that they did that. That was a ridiculous choice, completely unnecessary to the storyline. We didn't need a love story, and it definitely didn't need to be one that she would have been fired for. Why did we do that? That was ridiculous. Terrible choice. Really weakened this female character. Just, yeah, I hated that. And I know that if you maybe don't work in sport, you wouldn't necessarily understand how inappropriate and how that would not, and unprofessional, and how that would never ever happen. And if it did, you would never work again. So I hated that we made that choice. It was ridiculous, unnecessary, weakened the whole point of that character and what she had achieved in the position she was in, and just like sort of dumbed her down to, like, of course she had to sleep with the sexy driver. You know, she's just a girl. So for me, this was a 9. You know, for the genre, the type of film, the fact that I don't even like Formula One, I loved this. It was long, but I never felt bored. I've taken 1 mark off for the ridiculous choice with the romantic storyline. the rest of it, I loved it. And I feel like I'm the only one. I don't know why. And then finally, last night we went to see the new Jurassic World Dominion film. Jurassic Park / World will forever hold the most special place in my heart. Jurassic Park, the original, was the first ever film that I saw at the cinema, and it was on my birthday. I went with my friends, and I've just never ever got bored of those films. I've loved every single one, you know, and it turned into Jurassic World and the whole sort of reboot. I feel like no franchise has ever managed to make as many films as there are in the Jurassic World series that stay so consistent, so true to like the original and the spirit and the style and the choices and the music and everything has just stayed so consistent through every single one of these films, and this one was no different. The second you hear that music, oh, although I will say that now whenever I hear that music, all I can do is sing along to the lyrics. It's Jurassic Park, it's a massive park, what could possibly go wrong? So that has slightly ruined the original music for me, but you know, that's a small price to pay. So this film, if you are familiar with the Jurassic World films, in the last one, the dinosaurs were now sort of living among us in the world. They had been unleashed and they were breeding and they were just sort of living everywhere. In this film, we're a couple, I think like a decade or so on from the last one. And now what's happening is a lot of the dinosaurs who were released and for a while started thriving and kind of becoming part of the world again, a lot of them have died off. It just turned out that in the long term, our environment didn't suit them. The, you know, changes in the atmosphere and all of that, they just couldn't survive, they couldn't thrive. And so now there are sort of pockets of surviving dinosaurs along the equator, mostly on this sort of chain of islands. That's where the surviving dinosaurs that have thrived and that have survived have sort of all congregated and are thriving in this specific area that is now a complete no-go zone for humans. You're not allowed to go there. So the dinosaurs have just taken over this little patch of the world and they're being left there alone. And there was also one of these islands that was at some point like a research facility for the old park, the Jurassic World Park, where they were creating like monsters, hybrids. It was where they were doing all these experiments, and basically any of the experiments that didn't work out and go into the park as an asset in like the previous film were left on this island. So they couldn't kill them because they were worth so much money, and so they would just keep them on this island all together. So it's an island full of like freak hybrid dinosaurs. So in this film, this group of people that are made up of like a scientist, a mercenary, some like soldiers and one evil businessman. This group of people are going to seek out specific dinosaurs because they need their blood, which they have discovered that is a cure for, I think, heart disease. I forget exactly the specific condition, but they've realized that this is going to be a cure, and so they need to go and get the blood from these specific dinosaurs that are now only in these incredibly dangerous places. So that's the sort of plot for this story. This group of people go off to this no-go zone to get the blood of the dinosaurs so they can all become billionaires. That's kind of how we start. And of course, everything goes incredibly smoothly with no problems and everyone's rich and happy at the end. Or something like that. I absolutely love how true, like I've said, this series stays to the originals, to the heart and soul and the plot and the storyline. I love how much they throw in as nods to like the originals and some of the previous films. We've got the banner falling in every film. I just love it. Every time I catch that, it just makes me so happy. The music, we had a long grass throwback, a plane and some trees, like that. Just so many sort of nods to the earlier films. I love that they do so much of that. I love that they keep it, you know, really just consistent with the vibe. You know, there's always quite a bit of comedy. There's always a lot of like chasing and running terrified. Great moments. The cast was incredible. I loved every single second of this. My daughter was terrified. Okay, this is a 12A. My daughter, which means, you know, under 12s have to go with an adult. I was worried about my son. My son, he's funny because he won't watch Harry Potter, terrified of the Harry Potter films. But then there's other things that he's not scared of that you think are so much scarier than Harry Potter. So there's really no predicting. We did go and see the last Jurassic World film at the cinema and he got me to jump. We all did, but he wasn't scared, like he got upset and wanted to leave the cinema, which he has been in like The Bad Guys. So there's really no predicting it. So I, wasn't sure whether this was going to be too scary for him and he wouldn't like it. He might want to walk out. I was sort of keeping an eye on both of my children. My son was raptured, like enraptured. He was just like gawking. It's just so beautiful. We went to an XL screen as well, so that's like the super large screen, and it was just incredible, like visually incredible. The dinosaurs, I mean, as always, they looked incredible in the first film. It's so timeless. It's so well done for how old those films are. If you compare it, we watched Jaws the other day, and now that's a little funny as opposed to scary. The dinosaurs still hold up today. That's a hill I will die on. In the original Jurassic Park, they still look incredible. They just are so good. Everything looks so real. Everything is so beautiful. The scenery, everything. Beautifully done. So realistic, incredible. He just looked like he was in heaven the entire time. Did he jump? Yes, but he also finds that quite funny when he sort of gets the life scared out of him. He'll then, think that's hilarious. My daughter couldn't look for a good 10 minutes of the film. She was like saying, I'm not going to be scared. She is, into vampire programs. She loves it. So I did not see this coming, but she found a particular bit of it terrifying, like she wouldn't even look. We all loved it. Even my daughter, though she was petrified, gave it a 9. My son said 10. For me, this was a straight 10 out of 10. Everything I wanted it to be. Loved it so much. In no way deviated from how much I loved all of the previous ones. Probably one of my favourites of the sort of reboot films, actually. Just loved every minute of it. Please make 25 more. I'll never get bored of them. Okay, let's look at this makeup. Shall we start with this Viseart Midsommer palette? I think this might be my new favourite from Viseart. I find the mattes are just exceptional from Viseart. Such incredible matte formula that they have in their palettes. But I sometimes find their shimmers are a little more subtle than I want them to be. Not in this palette. Like, look at that stunning shimmer on the lid there. And there's not just one of them. There are some stunning shades in here. This gorgeous duochrome. This is like a wet look. Really glorious sheeny shadow here. Stunning, really, really pretty, gorgeous everyday colour story. So wearable, so many options in here. Can't wait to play with that one more. Now, this foundation, on first impressions, I do feel like it looks slightly more matte. This is the new side. This is the OG side. I feel like this side is a little glowier than the new side, which is what I was worried about when I talked about this in my Will I Buy It. When they're talking about it being very oil controlling and very long wearing and it's standing up to humidity and blah, blah, blah. I was thinking it sounds like they're going to have made it a bit more matte, a bit more bulletproof, and it looks like I think they might have. I will update you, of course, in my monthly roundup once I have used this a good few times on my whole face and seen how it's got on, on long days in warm weather, and really see how it wears in comparison to the original. I will say the colour I think is exactly the same, so I think you could safely, use your same shade, and I think it will be, do you know what, they're not identical. So this is the new shade, this is the old shade, Maple. I don't know how well you'll be able to see on camera. There is like a hair's difference, I would say, in the undertone. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. I'd say the new shade is a hair warmer than the original. That's what I'm seeing with my eyeballs. It's as flawless and smooth and has the same level of coverage, I would say, to the original. I just feel like there's a slight finish difference and it looks a little more matte than I would say this side that looks a little more of a natural matte finish. Still very skin-like, incredible coverage with a small amount, blended in seconds. We'll see how it gets on with a few more tries. Now, you've heard me talk about this bronzer a few times now. I absolutely love it. I find it so easy to work with. It's so natural. I love the undertone. I love how easy it is to use. It melts, it feels like a cream, although it is a powder. The undertone is perfect. I love the packaging. I can only say good things about it. Now, I used the highlighter today from this Nars palette. This is number 2. I think it's the medium, if you have the names rather than the numbers of these palettes, these Hot Escape palettes. Now, I used the highlighter because this highlighter is the shade Electra. So this is one of their new formula highlighters, their singles, in the shade Electra. And as you saw, I think this is called like an luminous, like it's got a name that makes you think it's going to be quite soft and subtle, but as you saw, it's really quite metallic and really beaming. I have managed to tone it down with a fair bit of blending and buffing. I've made it into a highlighter that can work for me, but it's not my style of highlighter. It's definitely too much, a bit too beaming, too metallic. I don't really want to have to like blend and buff and really work something in for it to get to the level I want it to be. You know, I did use quite a fluffy brush. What did I use? I used my other Sonia G Tissue brush, which is a light fluffy brush and gives you quite a diffused application. If I'd used my fan brush, I can't even imagine what might have happened, but definitely a little much for me. This Kosas blush, I really like this shade. This is the shade Wavelength. I have tried a previous shade of this blush, which I didn't love, if you remember, because it was just, the base was a little off. It's got so much glow in it. And I think on my skin tone, the shade that I had before, it just went really grey on my skin tone, so I didn't love it. This shade I think is working much better for me. It doesn't seem to have that sort of lighter base to it, and it's a bit more of a sort of subtle sheen, which I really like. Also very, you know, you can see that's a fairly heavy swatch, but it can be a really nice subtle pretty shade as well, which I really like. This Gucci lipstick I've been loving. I've never tried this formula before. As I said in my Will I Buy It, it is one that you guys have always told me I need to try. It does have a faint scent to it. A lot of people ask me that. I don't think it has like any taste to it. A lot of people have, you know, asked me about that as well. It seems to have a very faint sort of like floral scent to it, but nothing overpowering, quite subtle, not that noticeable. It feels delightful on the lips. They said on the skin. It feels lovely and light, very comfortable, very nourishing, a little bit buttery, you know, not at all sticky, nice sort of soft amount of pigment to it. This shade, which is They Meet in Argentina, or They Met in Argentina, is just a perfect, like Your Lips But Better everyday shade. Really wearable, perfect for summer. Really happy with that. The packaging is that limited edition packaging, which I don't know if it's just me, I don't really love it. I feel like it's a bit old-fashioned. Reminds me of like some curtains that my grandmother might have had at one point. I don't know. But I would say all in all, a pretty successful little trying on session. So as for what is next on my list to see together, I've seen a couple of trailers for that. That is definitely looks right up my street. We've got a new Conjuring film. I love that series. This is Last Rites. I've now seen a trailer for this. This looks great. The tagline is like, this is why this was their last ever case, or find out why this was their last ever case. I want to know why. It looks terrifying. Perfect. I saw a Superman trailer this week. Superman, definitely not my typical cup of tea. You know I'm not a superhero girl, but something about that trailer made me want to watch it. I think that might be like a family, let's all go together, option of the month. Not sort of usually for me, but I quite like the look of the trailer. We then have Bring Her Back, which you guys have been asking me about this for weeks, and I have never been given a trailer. I don't know if it's releasing a bit later here than in the US or something. Right up my street. Can't wait for that. Looks, you know, that psychological thriller that I love. Really scary. Can't wait for that one. I saw the first trailer for Project Hail Mary, I think during Jurassic Park. Immediately my daughter said, oh, I want to see this, can I watch this? And I don't know what the age certificate is on this film yet. It hasn't been announced yet here. So I don't know if she can see it or not, but this looks brilliant. I love like an end of the world film. Anyone else? I love it. The Day After Tomorrow, Armageddon. This looks along those lines. I love it. Ryan Gosling, can't go wrong. Definitely on my list to see. And then I saw a trailer for The Roses. It reminded me of Olivia Colman's previous film, Wicked Little Letters, which I thought, like, this is not for me. I'm too young for this film. And then I went to see it and it had me in absolute hysterics. I loved it. So this trailer gave me that same sort of Wicked Little Letters vibe. So this is Benedict Cumberbatch and Olivia Colman. And they play this sort of high-flying power couple that goes down the drain. So they seem to be like falling apart. I think they go through a divorce and it turns really, really ugly. It looked like one of those films that I'd say is not for me, but might end up being genius with those two in it. Can it really go wrong? I don't think so. It looked like it could be hilariously funny, just like Wicked Little Letters turned out to be, even though I thought that wasn't going to be for me. So I'll probably see that as well. So that is everything that is on my list to see next at the cinema. Please, as always, let me know. Have you seen any of these films recently? What were your reviews? What was your favourite? Give me some ratings out of 10. I love to see yours as well. Have you seen the Formula One film? Am I the only one who liked it? Please let me know what your thoughts were, why you hated it or why you loved it. Am I the only one who loved it? I don't know. But thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and I would love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye, 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 bye.